As we all know, this session is called the Vision from the Indian Parliament. As I walked up here on the stage with these two distinguished young members of Parliament, I remembered that when I started coming to the Indian Parliament decades ago as a young member of the Parliament of my country, all the Indian members of Parliament I met, they were very old. So I think we are very fortunate here today to have this new generation of Indian elected leaders to join us to share their vision on not only the Arctic but also the Himalaya region and how the connection between ice, wherever it is in the world, whether it is in the water tower of Asia up in the Himalayan mountains, or whether it is in the Arctic neighborhood of my own country. Let's not forget that India has over 10,000 glaciers on the Indian side of the Himalayas. 10,000 glaciers. That is more than, far more than all the Nordic Arctic states combined, unless we take Greenland with us. So, the presence of ice and glaciers is not just a concern for us in the Arctic, but also in the Himalayan regions. And although we often include Antarctica in these polar dialogue, what the Himalayas and the Arctic have in common is that they are the only major ice-covered areas in the world who have people, communities, cultures, national borders, conflicts, even militarized conflicts, and border disputes. So there's a lot to be learned for bringing into the discussion both the Arctic perspective, the Himalayan perspective, or as sometimes the Chinese call the third pole perspective. My wife actually proposed a few months ago that we talk about the North Pole, the South Pole, and the East Pole, meaning the Himalayas and so on. I thought that was an interesting comment. So, let us start this dialogue. And I will start with you, Milind, because you came to the Arctic Circle Assembly early on. I think when you were Minister of Shipping or something, or a little later. Later. Yes. And you have somehow followed the evolution of the Arctic dialogue. So before I turn to Mr. Thakur to share with us his perspective from his political base and his view of the Himalayas, let's tell us something, Milind, about what have you learned from being engaged in the Arctic journey? Because I think with all due respect to all the other Indian prominent elected leaders, you, despite your young age, you have the longest track record of being involved in the Arctic. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you and my warm welcome to you, President Grímsson. And it's an honor that an organization, the Arctic Circle, that you kindly put me on the advisory board of, is finally here in India. So I would like to welcome the Arctic Circle to India. I'm grateful to Samir Saran, to ORF, or ORF, as President Grímsson calls it, which has a Nordic-sounding name, by the way. And that we finally have brought the Arctic Circle to India. And, you know, you rightly mentioned that when you insisted, I remember in 2013, I was at that time the Shipping Minister of India, that I should lead the country's first ministerial delegation to explore participation between India and the Arctic, whether it's in the maritime space, research space, rare earths, minerals. I remember the visuals of polar bears starving in the Arctic. And the natural political question one would ask is, that's someone else's problem. India has nothing to do with that. And I think that India has, from a political point of view, come a long way in the last 12 years. In 2022, we have an Arctic policy. In the next few weeks, the Prime Minister of India will attend the India-Nordic Summit. Unlike other non-Arctic, or as some countries call themselves near-Arctic countries, we may not have an Arctic envoy, but there is certainly a great interest in the Arctic at a political level in New Delhi, in a city like Mumbai, which in many ways the starving polar bears are a bellwether of things to come in Mumbai. And in the Himalayan region, in, I'm sure, a state like Himachal Pradesh represented by Anurag. So I'm very excited about the potential of India bringing its track record of multiculturalism, its respect for, like you mentioned, the indigenous people, the Sami, the Inuit, being an important representative and a voice of the global south to the Arctic. And I think in that sense, it's come a long way. I can see many areas of partnership, most certainly in the area of research, of climate change, but certainly in the areas of rare earths, mining, minerals, and the maritime space. So I'm grateful, frankly, to you, President Grímsson, because I think, as I said on your 80th birthday celebrations in Reykjavik, even beyond the Arctic, you were somebody who bet on India many years before India bet on herself. So you played a very important role in guiding India and in facilitating India's greater involvement with regards to the Arctic.
So, Thakur, maybe you move the microphone a little bit closer. So
I think that's fine.
yes,
I think
yeah.
I'm audible.
I mentioned before, if you could help us, we will later on in this forum have a more extensive discussion on on the polar dialogue and the involvement of the Himalayas in this cooperation. So, please.
Thank you, President Grímsson, ORF and the Arctic Circle, and especially my friend Milind, for inviting me for this discourse. I'm delighted to be here among the climate saviors and the brightest mind across the globe who are present here in this August gathering. Let me first thank ORF because given our concern and towards the Arctic affairs, Arctic Circle and ORF who have put together this discourse to be held in India, it is very, very relevant to be here. Now, many of you may ask question, we are talking about Arctic affairs, why Himalayas and all that, because Arctic is world's early warning system, and the Himalaya is the water tower. And if we ignore one, the other will collapse. And that at a cost we simply can't afford, politically, financially, and morally as well. So anything happening in the Arctic Circle, in the Arctic region, directly impacts the Himalayas, because Arctic rains impact, Arctic ice melting impacts the Indian rains. This Arctic trade corridor will open new avenues for Indian exports. At the same time, if we don't engage now towards the rule making in the world's next strategic frontier, we'll be lagging behind. I think India's role is very important. And we are an observer in the last decade. I think India is an observer in the Arctic affairs, Arctic Circle. And in 2022, as my friend Milind said, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, India adopted its first Arctic policy with the 6 features of that. I'm not going into that. What I'm trying to say here is we are not in race for power, but we are in race against time. And coming from Himachal, which is a beautiful hill state, looking at the Himalayas where the beauty can hold you for hours and for many days to stay back there. But what we see in the last few years is heartbreaking. From a downpour to the heavy rains, cloudburst, avalanches, it has become a common thing. Thousands of people have lost their lives. On one hand, towards Mumbai, Lakshadweep, Andaman Nicobar, we see the sea level rising. On the other hand, we see the glaciers are melting, glacier lakes are formed, which are posing a lot of threat to the economy and to the ecology as well, to the environment overall. So I think whatever is happening in Arctic is directly impacting the Himalayas as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So,
If I can just add to that, I think that one thing which has changed, in terms of what Anurag said, and we represent very diverse constituencies in India, I think that the climate change as a political or an electoral issue has gained significant prominence in India. And therefore, the voters of India are now beginning to draw parallels between what's happening in the Arctic and what's happening in Mumbai or in Himachal Pradesh. And that obviously gives politicians, representatives, MPs, the government, the political heft and political will to increase their engagement. And that's a very positive sign that I've seen in the last few years.
And President Grímsson, if I may add to what Mr. Milind had said, India is a federal structure. One is the national policy, second is at the state level. State also plays a very important role. From Jammu, Kashmir, Ladakh, Himachal, Uttarakhand to the Sikkim. It's a long Himalayan belt. It will vary from one state to another. If I may throw some light on one of the reports given by the Indian Institute of Technology, Ropar, which says that 45% land area of Himachal Pradesh is extremely vulnerable to the natural disasters like floods, avalanches, and landslides. 45%. So I think that clearly throws a light on that. And second is, if you look at the last year's summer, we had 28 heat waves. The temperature soared up to 45 degrees in Himachal Pradesh, in so-called Himalayan state. At the same time, the Shimla, which used to be the summer capital during the Britishers' time and now the capital of Himachal Pradesh, has not witnessed the snowfall from December to March in the city in the last 3 consecutive years. At the same time, the snowfall has declined by 37% in Shimla, and the glacier in the region were spread over 50.8 square kilometers have reduced to 42.8 square kilometers between 2010 to 2020. So within 10 years of span. And the number of glacier lakes in Dhauladhar has increased from 36 to 43 in just 20 years of span. And this is the story of one out of the 1,239 glaciers in Himachal Pradesh, covering an area of close to 2,473 square kilometers, which covers about 4.4% of the total land of Himachal Pradesh. And if I have to throw some light of the J&K, this Kolahoy glacier in J&K has shrunk by 23% from 1962 till now. And there are many such glacier lake outbursts happened, the floods came in the last so many years. And it is directly going to impact cities like Mumbai and beautiful lands like Lakshadweep, the islands of Lakshadweep and the Andaman Nicobar.
So, I think we should open for some, if there are questions from the floor, please raise your hand if you want to. And while you are yes, there's one there, here, on the table at the end. Can you bring the microphone? Yes. Would be good to have one microphone this side and another station there. Yes, please.
Thank you. Sir, obviously now it's been established that Arctic is so important for us, right? What is stopping us from having a very proactive Arctic policy? We of course had an Arctic policy, but as far as approach or a proactive policy is concerned, you know what I mean, right? So what is stopping us, or what are the political or any other strategic hurdles that we are facing from actually engaging with the Arctic?
I don't think there's anything stopping us, but to be very candid, you know, India moves at a certain pace. 30 years ago or 40 years ago, when, let's say, China, for instance, moved into Africa to mine for natural resources, the prevailing debate was, why is India not moving as quickly? So I think India has historical ties with the Arctic. There are historical ties with the nation states of the Arctic. But in terms of having an Arctic policy which encompasses everything from climate change, research, all the way to economic opportunities, I think it's early days. But I really believe that events such as these will create awareness and the ecosystem, not just at a political level, but at a people level, to get people excited about the Arctic. So I think going forward now, it's a very clear, you'll hear this, I'm sure, tomorrow when the foreign minister addresses this audience. But I think it's very clear now with the government of the day that the Arctic is an area where we want to engage with at a much, much deeper level.
I would just like to add to what Mr. Milind has said. If you look at the Himadri and the India arc, that is, India's presence is already there in that region. But as you said, to give it more pace, to have more engagement, that is why we are having this discourse in India. It's a clear sign of that, thanks to the Arctic Circle and ORF, and thanks to my friend Milind.
So, yes, here in the front. You can bring the microphone here, please.
Hello, my name is Tejas Kashyap, live and work in Yellowknife, Canada, in the Arctic, subarctic region. Question to the panel is, how does India's strategy look like on the commodity side, particularly focusing on fresh water, given that the Arctic, subarctic region has 10 to 12% of the global freshwater reserves, and there is drought-like situations that's coming around. Is there a way we could look into the demand and the supply? And the second component I could be asking about is about the icebreakers manufacturing, the shipbuilding. That's a huge opportunity as well. So if you could shed some light about your thoughts or the strategy, or even as to how you look at these two particular opportunities. Number one is freshwater reserves, and the second one is shipbuilding capabilities. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, firstly, look, almost 40% of India's water is what's called transboundary waters, which is essentially based in glaciers outside India. The third pole, or the Tibetan plateau, being the largest of them. And if you look at the Brahmaputra, you look at many other rivers that feed India, that feed China, that feed much of South Asia and Southeast Asia. Those glaciers obviously are transboundary and based in India. So from a research point of view, from a glaciers melting point of view, water security, as Anurag pointed out, is a very, very serious issue. When it comes to icebreakers, I remember when I led a shipping ministry delegation to Reykjavik, and at the time, President Grímsson hosted us. It was very early days, and the ice was just starting to melt in the Arctic, and I don't even think the northern sea route had really become a route at the time, or it was just starting to at some levels. And countries were investing in icebreakers, nuclear icebreakers. So I think that is an area which India can certainly look at cooperating with countries like Finland, which have the technology. I was just talking to the ambassador during the lunch break. Has industry in India, whether it's the shipping industry, whether it's the maritime industry, we have some of the largest port operators in the country who can go out and build maritime assets in the Arctic. Have we as an industry, public sector, private sector, decided to go out and look at the Arctic as the next frontier of business? The honest answer is not yet. And I think in this case, in sometimes you have the private sector taking the lead and the government playing follow-up. I think in the case of the Arctic, we would see the government, a policy initiative, a strategic push by the government to move towards the Arctic from a dialogue point of view, from a climate change research point of view, perhaps from an economic point of view as well. And subsequently, you will see industry follow behind.
sorry if I can. There's a question there, yes.
Yeah, good afternoon to all of you. I am Anil Kulkarni, a professor at Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru. So last 10, 15 years, we have significant knowledge about the Himalayan cryosphere, and thanks to the President Grímsson for his initiative to start the glacial research in India, and large number of Indian students have gone to the Iceland, and Indian Institute of Science and University of Iceland has a collaborative program for that. Thanks for him for initiating this exchange program. But over a period of time, we have significant amount of knowledge of Himalayan glaciers, and we know glaciers are retreating and creating new disaster for the people living into the mountain. Key question is how that scientific knowledge to convert into the policy making. And that is where I think we need to move forward. So maybe it will be some like our political leadership can explain to us how to integrate this scientific understanding into the policy making. Thank you very much.
Thakur.
I think this could lead to a Himalayan Arctic parliamentarian task force could be made. Why not? I mean, we could have more parliamentarians, those groups who can share their views, ideas, get more exposure. What is Milind's view on this?
No, I think it's a good idea, and this is something which President Grímsson has been proposing, because the 2 poles and the 3rd pole. So there are similarities, and I think that's one area where we can work together, where MPs, politicians cutting across parties. How can we create this connection to start with at an MP to MP level between parliamentarians in India, especially those who have an understanding of the Himalayan glaciers, 3rd pole, with the North Pole. But the good thing, on a lighter note, I mean, since we're talking about poles, I think recently our moon rover, Chandrayaan-3, reached the South Pole in the moon. So the good thing is that our foreign policy is moving towards very new poles, whether it's the Arctic or the South Pole. But this is an area which we can expand. Talking to Samir Saran earlier, he suggested, which is a very good idea, where subsequent meetings like this between the Arctic Circle in partnership with an ORF can happen in different Himalayan states. We can do that, for instance, during the summer in a state like Himachal Pradesh, in Uttarakhand, in Kashmir, in Sikkim. So I think this will also bring people closer to the issue.
So I see that our time is up, but just follow.
Ladakh, I'm
yeah,
sorry, she's from Ladakh, yes.
just following this. Oh, you want to ask a question? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Kunjas Tolma. I come from Ladakh, the Indian Himalayan region. So this is an interesting venue to be discussed. We are talking about Arctic Circle. We are talking about glaciers sitting in a room full of air conditioned, powered by, I don't know what kind of energy we are using to power this. Meanwhile, back home in my place, it is already only 5 to 6 degrees Celsius right now at the moment. If we talk about climate change, we were having this apricot blossom festival in the ending of April and May, and suddenly between the blooms we saw snowfall, which is really not usual. So that is one of the impact that we have seen on the livelihood of the people living in the mountain regions. Now, if we talk about involvement of these people, we see very less involvement of the people who are directly impacted by these kind of climate change, or maybe even the policy. Right now in this room, if I count, I won't be able to count many people who are from the Himalayan region, actually. Besides maybe Mr. Thakur, who is the Honorable Member of Parliament. He comes from the lower part of the Himalayas, Himachal. I would request that maybe if we can involve more of the stakeholders directly coming from those places, because the people living in those areas are nomads who are dependent on sheep, Pashmina goat, which is very famous for the Kashmir, and all these whatever is policies are being done in the Arctic, they do directly impact other regions also. And like Mr. Anurag said, that we are facing more frequent global lake outbursts. We are facing more frequent floods also. And among all these, who are the most impacted are that we are seeing the women are the most vulnerable in all these climate-induced hardships. Secondly, I would like to thank Iceland.
If you can finish
yeah,
quickly.
I will just shortly. Iceland has been doing a really great job in promoting sustainable energy, especially geothermal energy, because of which in India we are seeing the push from the past few years, and in Ladakh we have the Puga geothermal project which is going on. So I would like to request other Nordic countries also that if you can help in capacity building of these kind of technologies which are sustainable, that would be impactful as part of being an Arctic Circle. Thank you very much.
President Grímsson, if you allow me,
Yeah.
I think it's a good point.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned Sameer's name as well, I think moving these kind of conferences to other parts of India would be a useful idea to bring people on board. Although I only disagree with one point, that the Himalayan region is not the only region of India affected. I come from Mumbai, which will be even more affected in many ways. But going to the people, getting people's support will, I think, create greater political will, which will help the cause.
And we are talking about Arctic affairs sitting in Delhi. As I said earlier, the ice melting there directly impacts here, the Indian rains. If it impacts here, the glacier melting, it also affects the sea level in Mumbai. So it doesn't matter where we are holding the conference, but the discourse is in the right direction, I believe. And people of Ladakh are much more aware. If you look at, they're still sticking to their old architecture. They're letting a lot of things happen in Ladakh. So we are grateful for that. We are much more aware than others in the region.
Well, thank you, both of you. And following what you just said previously, maybe I should take this opportunity to invite the two of you to bring a parliamentary delegation from India to the Arctic Circle Assembly in October. And we will be responsible for bringing some other Arctic parliamentarians to your meeting, as well as enable your colleagues to enjoy some of the other sessions. Whether that becomes a beginning of an Arctic-Indian parliamentary dialogue remains to be seen. But I think it would be an excellent continuation of this session if the two of you would hereby be mandated by us in the Arctic Circle Milind knows how to take me seriously, so just that you are hereby mandated to bring a parliamentary delegation from India to the Assembly. And I thank two of you very much for being here with us. And I think, following many of the points being made, that it is very proper that the next session will be on the Arctic impact on the Asian climate. How what is happening in the Arctic will have monumental impact on the Asian climate. That is perhaps the core of what we are trying to connect here. So thank you very much for finding the time from your busy schedule to be here with us.